Hey guys, so today we are going to address something, well, it's not really a subscriber question, but it's a very interesting statement that I had a bit of a talk with one of my junior coworkers, and at the same time it is a subscriber question because I had a comment that was touching on a very similar sort of thing. So what we're going to talk about today is going to be your value in the hierarchy and how there is this very interesting phenomenon, I think, where different languages and different like backgrounds within software development has different standings. So let's get into it. So this morning, or rather this actually just a few hours ago, I was working with just as normal, and we had this discussion about preferences in programming languages. And one of my new coworkers, he's a really nice guy, he's fresh out of college. We started talking about like preferences in like how different developers have, their forte. They have things that they enjoy more than other things, and they have different programming languages preferences and stuff like that, right? And so I said that he asked me, what's your preference, Frederick? And I said, well, my personal preference for development is usually JavaScript. It's something that I know fairly well, and it's something that I feel very productive in. And then he explained that, oh yeah, because as I said, he's completely fresh. He's never actually, this is his first job. And the first thing he says to me is like, oh, okay, cool, JavaScript. I know, like, I don't know much about JavaScript. All I know is that it's like the butt of quite a few jokes. And that's made both him, me, and one of my other senior coworkers kind of laugh about it, because it is true. And then I kind of laughed, and I said to him, you see, I'll give you the same thing. I'll tell you the same thing that I tell, because this is very common. Like, it's extremely common that if you say out loud that try to go to a C++ conference and say that you like JavaScript, and you'll see what I talk about. And I'll just tell you the same thing I usually tell people when they have this attitude towards that language, and I kind of go, okay, it's basically any other language, it's almost any other language, and I kind of go, oh, yeah, you may not like it, but it's the most popular programming language in the world. The largest community in the world, has the biggest investment from the planet. Like, overall, there's no other language that has that much invested into it. It can basically do whatever you want within the web platform, and it does it on par with basically everything else. And there is at this point no language that it has a brighter future, or has proven itself so many times. And yet there are quite a few naysayers. And what's interesting about these people is that they usually are, well, not in like their preferences in languages may be very great for various reasons, but they cannot even begin to compete with this language. So I looked at my coworker and I say, you see, that's the thing. What you should know is that there are these hierarchies within in IT, where the people who call themselves system developers usually look down on people who call themselves web developers, and people who work on the back end look down on front end developers, and so forth and so forth and so forth, because you have these hierarchies of people who will claim that they kind of get high on their own farts. I'm sorry, but that's kind of the way I look at it. And if we go up the ladder, we have like the system level programmers, and then you have the computer scientists who think that they are smarter than the system level programmers, and then you have at the very peak summit up there, you have the mathematicians who only work in Haskell, and they look down on everybody else. And I told him basically the thing that I'm going to tell you as well. Guys, you at some point you're going to hear this. It's very likely that you will hear this, unless you of course are one of these people. And I had a very similar comment on one of my threads, where this person was talking about, he seemed to be a fairly junior profile, because he said that I've been interested in learning Java and C#, but then I rethink and I remember that these are not immutable languages, and they have nullable values and all that stuff. And then he basically asked me, Frederick, how can you possibly work in a language, or how can you be productive in a language where you will only produce bad code? because according to this person, there is no way apart from using immutability and functional practices to write good software. And I told him the same story I'll tell you. There was not that long ago a candidate in our pipeline, super smart guy, senior as all hell. I think he had 15-20 years of experience. And we gave him a code test, which everybody at the company has more or less solved. And he was working on it, and as time went on, he was walking through the problem and, you know, applying his knowledge to the problem. And one of my coworkers who was conducting the test had a check-in with him and then looked at the solution he was providing, and he went for the high performance, highly optimized solution. And the thing is, what he doesn't know, and what we didn't tell him, is that this solution or this problem has two solutions that we consider to be good solutions. You have the highly optimized one, and you have the quicker one, the more pragmatic one. The problem is that the highly optimized solution will simply take too much time for you to actually implement within the given time frame. And that's exactly the test. The test is to figure out if he is good enough at what he does to actually understand that he needs to meet the deadline. And he needs to do that regardless of, like, he has to solve the problem in such a way that it works, but also on time. And he failed completely because he could not, like, even with a lot of assistance and us kind of trying to help him to understand that you don't have time for this, you have to do it another way. He would completely refuse to write software in any other way. And the morale, and this is what I was trying to communicate to this person, that the idea that you can only write good software or so forth with all these best practices, and because this is all, guys, this is coming from the same place. You have these people who are obsessed with they make programming about programming itself. They talk, and honestly, in my experience, the only people who have the luxury of having this sort of mindset are two types of people. It's the public speakers and unemployed programmers, or people like programmers nobody wants to work with, because these sorts of people, like, they're simply not going to fit into an environment where you have realities such as deadlines, you have realities such as unforeseen events, you have realities such that there's an already existing code base written in a certain way, and regardless of what you feel about it, you're going to have to be able to work in it. You can't just sit down and say, hey, this code base isn't up to my standards, I'm not going to touch this until it's fixed, or you're going to give me a year or two to rewrite the whole code base in this case, a functional style. And that's the thing that I was talking to my coworker about. These different levels of people who look down on people beneath, it's you have to think for yourself and decide if that is important to you. It's because you're going to face them. And as somebody who openly says that I really like JavaScript, I've heard this quite a lot of times. And all I can tell you is that on average, these people are usually people, as I said, they're maybe on the forums and so forth, and I would feel very sorry for any company who hires this sort of person, because you can't have this productive working environment with people who behave in that manner. It's disrespectful to other people, and the fact of the matter is that it's quite possible to write well-working software and build entire companies around software that is not academically perfect, or whatever you want to call it. So what I want you to take away from this is that this idea that you have to excuse your personal choice in language, or that you have to feel bad because some person working on some highly optimized code, and this person, as I said, they're higher on their own farts. You don't have to really listen to these people all that much, because at the end of the day, guys, what I can tell you, and I told the person who commented about this good code practice and functional programming, I told them the vast majority of companies, successful companies, do not care about what the stuff that you're talking about. They're doing just fine. Java is, in this scenario, he was talking about how can somebody work in Java because it doesn't have all these nice things. And I said it's actually very easy. You just have to be a good software developer. Because and this is just me personally saying that a good software developer, a true professional, is the sort of person who can solve the problem given the constraints that they have. In other words, you solve the problem as well as you can with the language you are given. Because in my mind, if you're the sort of person that who just says that, hey, I'm going to dismiss JavaScript because, you know, it's a bullshit language, right? All I'm hearing is that you can't do that. That's all I'm hearing. All I hear is that you can't do it. You do not have what it takes to be able to solve a problem within that language. I don't care what your reasons are. I cannot use you for this problem. And to me, that is, regardless of how you want to justify it to yourself, that's weakness. And it's in my opinion, fairly unprofessional. That's the way I feel about it anyway. So basically, guys, what I'm telling you is that if you want to be like involved in these sorts of discussion, more, you know, feel free to. But on average, software development is about solving real world problems, and it's very rare that the sort of academic perfection that some people will pitch and use as leverage for their arguments and ways of making other people feel inferior. These sorts of people, you don't really meet them all that much, and you can just kind of tune out the noise when they start talking, because, as I said, the only people who get around, who can survive with that sort of way of behaving are academic programmers, like people who sell an ideal, who are very unlikely to work in the real software development, in the sort of like real day, everyday world that most of us work, or juniors who doesn't, you know, they don't even know better. That's at least from my experience, because honestly, the best programmers that I know are the sort of people who, as I said, they solve the problem as well as they can within the given time frame. And they don't get bogged down into who uses the coolest language, who has the biggest, you know, whatever. But that's the way I think about it. Have a great day.